Well, hello, Nativity Bible heads. It is Dr. Wayne, and it is time for Power Bible Study. We are now in the fourth Sunday in Lent, what we call Laetare Sunday, which is from the ancient rite where in Latin it would start out with, it's a Gregorian chant, a word in a Gregorian chant that means rejoice, because the liturgy starts out, rejoice, O Jerusalem, and taken from Isaiah. Anyway, this is the day where we typically in the church will wear a pink colored, off rose colored kind of a vestment. Now, I'm not wearing a rose-colored vestment in my Bible study here, but I am wearing something of a pastel nature, yes, something that represents a little bit more, mirth, a little more levity, a little more joy in this long season of this Lenten season. We have for our biblical enjoyment today, we have 1 Samuel 16. The 23rd Psalm. 23rd Psalm gets a lot of play in this year. In fact, you're going to hear it again sometime during Eastertide and then late in the after Pentecost season. So we get a lot of Psalm 23. Different contexts for different times we use this. It emphasizes different aspects of the Psalm. Also, we get a reading from Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 to 14. Ephesians 5 verses 8 to 14, okay? And then John chapter 9, the whole chapter from beginning to end. Yeah, let's get to it. So in 1 Samuel 16, got to remind ourselves when we talk about the books of 1 and 2 Samuel, this is all about the early monarchy of Israel. Samuel, the prophet, after whom these books are named, he appears prominently at the beginning, but he kind of fades out. Today, we see his most, well, you could say prophetic act in 1 Samuel 16. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul? I have rejected him from being king over Israel." Now, the background of all this, of course, is that there was a controversy in the land. Remember, Samuel was this transitional figure from the time of the judges to the time of the monarchy, and he historically shows up as like the last of the judges, and he is the one who helps bridge the gap from that kind of a confederacy they had to a monarchy. Now, his actions, he told the people why they didn't want to have a king. And he was solid with God on this one. And then it was like, okay, I'll give you a king. And he gives them Saul. And and Saul's kingship basically was not a success. And Samuel is still being used by God to say like, okay, what direction do we go here? Because obviously this wasn't it. So this is where it says, "How long will you grieve over Saul?" The Lord said this to Samuel. It's like, I've rejected him. It's like, okay, maybe this wasn't the best choice. Maybe there's something that can be done. Are you upset? Why are you upset, Samuel? Why are you upset? The bottom line is that Samuel was afraid for the fact that he anointed Saul, and now he sees the writing on the wall that it's like, this is not going to work. So why is he grieving? Because he could experience some rejection by Saul, some sort of repercussions if he were to act against Saul. So this thing about how long will you grieve over Saul? I have rejected him over from being king over Israel. Samuel was in a tough spot. Now, the Lord gives him a task in the midst of his grieving and his like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. He gives him a task. Fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons. Notice Samuel here doesn't really have any insight into what God is doing. This is kind of reminiscent of the call to Abraham. Remember that, where he's to set out from his own country and his own kin and to a land that I will show you. Well, this is kind of like Samuel. He's venturing into unknown territory, but it's very specific where he's supposed to go, all right? For I have provided for myself a king among his sons, Jesse the Bethlehemite. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite. Bethlehemite is somebody who's from Bethlehem, right? Well, we know that historically that the Bethlehem was the city of David's birth. Also, it will be the city of Jesus' birth as well, right? Verse 2, Samuel said, oh, how can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me. It's like, this is very risky what you're asking me to do, God. I could end up in the trash heap because if Saul, if he smells betrayal, then I'm a goner, okay? And the Lord said, this is something that's interesting. There's a long history in gospel in biblical literature for the deception, for like, well, we got to play it like this, but it's really this. Okay, this is one of those things. And the Lord said, take a heifer with you, and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Nobody's going to doubt this. Obviously, this is something that Samuel had been acting as, so he acts in a priestly fashion. It's not. It is very clear that that was a part of his role that people saw that he could perform. So it wouldn't be like, wait a second, you can't do that. Well, obviously, that was not the belief, right? I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I name to you. So he's really on a fishing expedition, is he not? Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him, trembling, and said, do you come peaceably? Why would they be coming to him trembling? Because they are in fear that it's possible that he has malintentions, like maybe there's something that he's got to do that's not going to be civil. They don't know for sure. He said, verse 5, peaceably, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. So it's like, okay, we don't really know why you had to come to Bethlehem to do that, but if that's what you're doing, yeah, sure, we're in on that. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. So notice that the people who came to him were the elders, and apparently Jesse was amongst them, maybe, I guess. Otherwise, why would he have to sanctify Jesse and say that, oh, you're invited too. In fact, especially you. When they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, well, surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord. Samuel wanted this thing to get over quick, okay? He, even though he had been told what he was told and he had the ruse worked, obviously, this is, it's like he wanted, he is known for having been attracted to Saul to anoint him because of the fact that the way Saul appeared. He was a man of much grandeur. Okay, a very tall man, very striking, and they stood out, that kind of a thing. That didn't go so well, but Samuel was definitely in this realm of, that's the standard, that's a presumptive standard, so I'm going to go with that. But the Lord said to Samuel, what? Do not look on his appearance, yeah. Or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. Notice those the same words that he received with regard to the Lord's attitude about Saul. It's like, so it's clear that the things that Samuel thought were attractive to God, God says, no, we're not playing by the same rule book here. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Ooh. Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. He said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. Now, we're not being told the method that Samuel is using. How is he doing this guess and check method, right? It's very possible that we're not being told that he is using the holy dice, okay? The and the thummim, those dice that they would roll that believed that was that revealed the will of God. So, all we're told, though, is that the Lord hasn't chosen it. We're not told the means, and I'm guessing that he probably did use some sort of a tried and true method, right? Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, the third son, right? And he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. Apparently, even though Samuel was obviously committed to doing what God wanted, he was hoping that it would be over quick. It wasn't. And his motivation is reflected in the fact that he really wants to do this thing, like, I got to get this done and get out. Not the Lord's plan, though, right? Verse 10. Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, and Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord hasn't chosen any of these. Samuel, now remember, the Lord had already told Samuel that he has provided a king out of the sons of Jesse, and yet so Samuel knew that if the answer was no on all of these, that obviously there was something more that he hadn't been shown. Now get this. Samuel said to Jesse, are all your sons here? And he said, there remains yet the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, we know where this is going, right? And it's always... keeping the sheep is not considered the most glorified job. It's something that you just pawn off to, like, okay, it's like when you're the youngest, like in a fraternity initiation kind of a thing. You get shafted, right? Well, this is the station that David held. Okay, and Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him. For we will not sit down until he comes here." The sitting down, it might refer to the fact that there's this tension that's got to be released by the anointing before we can proceed with any festivities, right? He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy. Have you described somebody's ruddy lately? Ruddy. You would be ruddy if you were very, if you're kind of flushed, okay? Like if you're like, you've been working and, your cheeks get reddish and stuff. Maybe it could refer to that, or maybe it refers to the fact that he had red hair. Could be. Rosy cheeks and all that. Maybe that's what it was. And had beautiful eyes. Oh, yeah. And was handsome. This, I believe, is not necessarily the observation of Samuel so much as our narrator. Our narrator loves David. And if you, the narrator, the narrative, this thing, the preponderance of the narrative viewpoint throughout the Deuteronomistic history, which starts in Deuteronomy and goes through Joshua and Judges and then 1st and 2nd Samuel and also 1st and 2nd Kings, is that this narrator just loves David. David is the bomb, okay? And so consequently, you just can't hold back and say, oh yeah, even though the Lord looks upon the heart, unlike the rest of us, but parenthetically, looking on him, ruddy, beautiful eyes, handsome, it's just in love with the physical appearance. I think it's more parenthetical than anything. The Lord said, rise and anoint him, for this is the one. And we've already been told that the Lord looks on the heart, so Samuel's got to trust this, right? Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. Notice, it's like in the presence, it's not secret. This is like, they've all seen, there's 7 witnesses to this, right? This symbolism, the fact that he was 8th, represents something beyond that perfection of 7, but the presence of 7 witnesses it's like, well, we all saw it happen, is something that, see, this is not something that's necessarily proclaimed. It's kind of done in a way of like, this is a portent of the future, but yet it's not something that is to be necessarily like, we don't want everybody to know this, especially we don't want Saul to know this because, see, remember Samuel's fear, he still had this fear for his life, right? And anointed him in the presence of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Samuel then set out and went to Ramah. Ramah was where Samuel lived, okay? That's basically meaning he went home, okay? So what we want to get out of this is, especially in our time of Lent, is the grace of the Lord, the fact that situations aren't always as they seem. There is always a deeper spiritual significance that we should look forward and toward. Now, I'm going to move on. Oh my goodness, yes, I got to move on to the 23rd Psalm. The 23rd Psalm. If you look at it in your Bible, it actually says a Psalm of David, which is a superscription and not necessarily one of the verses of the Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. He revives my soul and guides me along right pathways for his name's sake. So a metaphor for the king of this time was as a shepherd, okay? And it's probably that metaphor that this linkage is established as this is a responsorial to that psalm. And it is can be seen as a prayer of David, a kind of thing that David can, as king, rely on, because if the Lord is my shepherd, if I'm the shepherd, the Lord better be my shepherd, okay? Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. All of this is shepherding imagery. There is, shepherds were protectors of the flock. They were defenders of the flock. The rod and the staff were used to gather the flock. The rod and the staff the crozier that the bishop carries. Okay, it looks like a big. It's a shepherd's hook, is what it is. And what those things were used for was for poking and prodding and pulling back. And the thing with sheep was they don't always obey the best. And so the rod and the staff, that's something you got to have as a shepherd in order to keep the sheep in line. And it's something that is not, is it comfortable for the sheep? No, but does it work? Yeah. it works. That's what you need to keep the sheep in line. All right, so continuing. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me, right? Well, you spread a table before me in the presence of those who trouble me. You have anointed my head with oil, and my cup is running over. Now, if we stay with the shepherding imagery, the spreading of a table, this is an expression that was used in that area of the world to preparing a pasture for the sheep to graze on. All right, the idea that it's been cleared of any foul intentions by wild beasts and such. To say you've anointed my head with oil, my cup is running. Yes, we get the imagery of the anointing of David, but one of the things that the shepherd will do in gathering the sheep and finding a place for them to graze is to nurse the wounds of some of the sheep that might have somehow experienced some sort of injury along the way. And if we maintain the shepherding imagery, it shows that this balm of medicine and healing, that's a function of the shepherd. If we're going with this imagery, which I think is helpful, because that's the reason why it's being used. Now we're going to get this again, this psalm again during Shepherding Sunday. This is not that though. Okay. Surely your goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You know what? It's very possible that this was one of those, traditionally, some traditions hold that, David wrote all the Psalms, which clearly he did not. It's very possible that this was one that was written by him as one who became king, who understood his role as shepherd, right? And the idea that this expression of faith, surely your goodness and mercy shall follow me all the day. It is an expression of faith in God's caretaking, right? I know this is a very popular psalm with regard to funerals and such. I recommend to you that we see this there are other contexts you can see this in. We're not going to go through all of them. I just wanted to show you one way of reading all of it as fitting into the shepherd imagery, since shepherd is a metaphor for king in the realm of the way Israel thought. Okay? Now, as we switch to the New Testament readings, we're going to see more of this emphasis on the presence of the Lord making a huge difference, especially when we think about David and how did his life go after that? Well, he now became an agitator to Saul. He now became a little bit of a fly in the ointment, if you will, for Saul. But yet, there was this, his destiny, right? This thing that was that he was to fulfill, this position that he was supposed to carry forward. That is part of the imagery that we take with us. Now, let us look at our Ephesians passage. Okay. Once you were, this is Ephesians chapter 5, verses 8 to 14. Oh, by the way, the book of Ephesians is much different than what we would call the Pauline corpus, right? Most of the letters of Paul are very occasional in that they are intended to respond to a situation that was present. And we see in Ephesians more of it's almost like a midrash, if you will, or on some of the teachings of Paul, right? Once you were in darkness, and now in the Lord you are light. Yeah, this has to do with the fact that there was in the early church a division that was going on between those Jews who were confessing Jesus as the anointed, Get it? The anointed. And we just saw an anointing of David, right? Well, what if we think of that anointing as that the coming of the Messiah, right? And we talk about, and Paul is now applying that to the way in which we live out our baptismal vows as a people of light and not of darkness. Once you were darkness, notice it says it's not a spatial thing so much as like not once you were in darkness. No, it's not spatial. Spatial as in spatial, as in like where you are. It's more who you are. Get that? Once you were darkness, but now in the Lord you are light. Yeah. The emphasis of the early church was that you can't divorce this from the gospel reading in John that we're going to get a little bit of in a bit. Remember how in John 1 it talked of, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. The light has come to and that this word was the light and the light of life, and that the darkness did not overcome it. Okay, this is important. There is this dichotomy. There is a connection between this light and darkness imagery. Live as children of light, for the fruit of the light is found in all that is good and right and true. Paul is clinging to what we know the difference is that Christianity made for people in that day and age, okay? Life was hard back then. There wasn't a lot of light. There wasn't a lot of mirth, of happiness, of joy, okay? This is his reminder that despite the way life looks, who we are is something much bigger than our circumstances, okay? For the fruit of the light is found in all that is good and right and true. I could go on and on about that. Try to find out what is pleasing to the Lord, okay? One of the things that Paul was dealing with in this what we get in Ephesians is there's a little bit of we got to leave some of this stuff behind that we used to be a part of that was not helpful to giving light to the world. It's important that we see that who we are is light. So therefore, if we were darkness, but now in the Lord we are light, there's a certain way of being that looks, okay? Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. It's as though if we are light, okay, and we bring to light those things, there are hidden intentions of people that we can illuminate and reveal as like, oh, that's not what we thought it was. It's as though it's like when people go after a certain political leader or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, this is the way, this is the truth. But when light comes, you've got to go with what the light shows. Okay, the light reveals what the darkness was hiding. Okay. For it is shameful even to mention what such people do secretly. This could speak of actions, it could speak of intentions and such. But everything exposed by light, meaning by you, becomes visible. This is the part of who we are. As Christians, we are that light. We bring to light those things that people have been deceived by. And we're not just talking like simple like morality play stuff. We're talking about things that people accept as truth, okay? Who we are is we bring light to everything so that true truth is revealed. Okay? But everything exposed by light becomes visible. For everything that becomes visible is light. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's because everything that is, things that, once we see them, we can no longer unsee them, okay? Therefore it says, sleeper, awake, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Now this is typically printed in a phrasing that indicates a liturgy, a poem, some sort of a lyric, if you will. Very possibly these words were stuff that was said to people at baptism to give them a sense of this new life in Christ. Remember, one of the things that Lent traditionally has been is a preparation for baptism at Easter, and a time for those who had been shunned, I guess you will, that had been put on the outs because of misdeeds and dark deeds and things that were unbecoming to the body of the church, where they are then accepted back in through this time of penitence, right? For everything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, sleeper, awake, rise from the dead. Sleeper, awake, wake up, get yourself woke. I don't care how you think about, how you feel about that phrase. It wasn't invented by people just recently to get woke. Wake up to what's going on. Stop being asleep. Stop accepting your little prejudices and predilections as like, oh, well, here's the thing. If we use our Christianity as an excuse to just be mean and unloving, then there's something wrong with that. This is what Paul is talking about. We don't use, if we are light, when we expose those things that are in the dark, there's no longer, they can no longer nip up to get us, right? We have to go with what we see that is revealed, okay? This is the direction that the church is going. This is the direction that Paul is urging this congregation, right? For everything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, sleeper, awake, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. One of the things that happens in baptism, the word baptism, remember, it literally means to dip, right? To go into the water. It became in the way Paul thinks of baptism as metaphorical representation of a resurrection, like going to death, going into the chaos, but coming back up and being revealed as light. That's the reason why they believed that the way early baptism was practiced was that it was done in the nude. And that when you came up, that's when you got your robe, the white robe, to symbolize that you have come back from the dead. You have been exposed to the light, and now the Christ will shine on you. I very much likely that is indeed a baptismal liturgy from days gone by. Okay, now I've got to get to the gospel. The entire chapter 9. John 9, verses 1 through 41 is a story of a healing, right? As he walked along, he saw a blind man from birth. Notice, first of all, we got to remember, we're dealing with the Gospel of John here. So in John, Jesus is typically the instigator of the moments by which people find themselves confronted by what he has to bring. They're usually not asking for things so much as Jesus is, simply by who he is being, gives what is necessary to the moment, okay? That's one of the reasons why the wedding at Cana was such a crucial moment, because it was like, remember Jesus' initial response at the wedding at Cana when his mother came to him and said, "Hey, the wine's giving out," and Jesus is like, "What's that? What's that to me? My time has not yet come." Yeah, that's one of the things he said. Well, in the series of signs that he performs, okay, they all are intended to point to what it is, who he is, okay? Not to like, oh, well, this is just the need that was there and I'm meeting needs and helping people. He's not writing blank checks. What he is doing is performing signs that indicate that when the light of the world is about us and around us, it encounters a vacuum where there is no light. Light comes in, right? That's the vacuum that situation whereby that love and that divinity, if you will, comes forth. Look at this. He saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi," and by the way, the word rabbi, this is an untranslated word. It's one of those untranslated words. This is the word in rabbi. In Greek, it means, literally it means teacher, my teacher, okay, teacher. Although the idea of rabbis did not exist actually back then. So, but yet the temptation to translate it rabbi is very, it's hard for a lot of translators to fight against, but it literally means teacher, okay? My teacher. Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Notice that the disciples, their function is as a foil, okay? They ask questions that enable other things to happen. So they never show themselves as, perceiving. They are always the ones who are asking the questions that moves Jesus into a direction of revealing himself. And they get even more than they bargained for, right? Jesus answered, "Well, neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him." Do we ever think of that as somehow a circumstance that we're in? Maybe it's something that we've caused, or maybe it's something that just happened to us. That how often do we take the viewpoint of, oh, this is an opportunity for God to show God's self? This is a very good lesson that we should look upon as an opportunity when affliction arises for us, and ask, well, how is God in this? How can I create the kind of meaning out of this circumstance that reflects the glory of God? This is what Jesus is doing with regard to the man born blind. Now, verse 4, we must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Oh, here's that thing about while it is day. Remember what Paul said about being darkness and light? Well, night is coming when no one can work. So it's like Jesus is basically saying, I'm the light, and since I am the light, there's only one thing that can happen when darkness is there and light comes. The lightness always defeats the darkness because it shows what's there. It reveals what's there. It's no longer something that's hidden. It's no longer something that's a curiosity. It's no longer a mystery. It's like the plain sense of what is in front of you is right there. So therefore you have to go with, we have to go with that. This is not a conservative way of looking at things. The act of discipleship, the act of love, the act of being God's anointed in the world means that we go with what is revealed. What the light shines on the darkness, we go with that because to stay in the darkness is to pretend that the light hasn't come, all right? Okay, let's move on. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Verse 6. When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes. This is a little bit reminiscent of our creation theology that we have in Genesis, where man was formed from dust of the ground, from the riverbed, right? The clay, the molding, and all of that. So we get a taste of that. So that in Jesus' action, I believe that in John's gospel specifically, where he has a very high Christology, he is showing how Jesus is merely acting out of who he is as the Son of God, as God himself, and in the flesh, right? Saying to him, okay, wait a second. Spat mud and saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes. Saying to him, verse 7, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent, yeah. Then he went and washed and came back. And he was able to see, yeah. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask. Notice how Jesus disappears from the scene here and doesn't come back until much later in the story. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some were saying, yeah, that's him. Others were saying, no, but it's someone who looks a lot like him. You know what they say, all of those blind beggars look alike. You know, maybe that's the kind of thing they were saying. He kept saying, I am the man. But they kept asking him, then how were your eyes opened? And he answered, well, the man called Jesus. See, he didn't know who Jesus was, but he knew him from what happened to him, right? The man called Jesus made mud, spread on my eyes, said to me, go to Siloam and wash. Then I went and washed and received my sight. And they said to him, where is he? And he said, I do not know. Notice this is the first retelling of it. He's recounting the facts. They're asking, how did this happen? He said, I don't know how it happened. All I know is this guy told me he did this, he told me to do this, and then I saw. That's all he knows, right? His experience. All he could do was give his experience, right? They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now, it was a Sabbath. By the way, anytime we see the thing about the Pharisees, this definitely gives us an idea that this is a later time when, the Pharisees weren't that big of a deal in actual Jesus' day. Why? Because the Pharisees didn't rise to a position of prominence and authority until there was no temple. And when Jesus was there was temple. So when the temple goes away and worship is confined to the synagogues, that's when the Pharisees became a powerful entity, right? They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, we know what that's going to mean, right? Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes and then I washed and now I see. The second time he told the story, right? Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? Yeah, there's this argument over, wait a second, if he did this and he did it on the Sabbath, there's no way he can be a good guy. And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened. And he said, he's a prophet. Yeah, I put it with a little question mark there. I don't know that he knew what Jesus was, but I'm purporting that maybe he wasn't so sure himself, but it's like, well, I've heard prophets do this, so he's a prophet. He's a prophet? Maybe? Yeah. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight. So there's like, we got to get evidence for this. We need to prove that he truly had been blind previously. So bring in his parents, right? And they asked them, is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? And his parents answered, see again, they stick with the facts. We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is now that now he sees. nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. See, they already had asked him, and he already told them twice, and they didn't believe it, right? His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So they bounce it back. Okay, one of the overriding themes that we have in our Johannine gospel is a later division, if you will, between the people in the synagogues, the Jewish people who were confessing Christ as the Messiah, and Jesus as the Messiah, and those who were like, no, I don't think so. And they were experiencing division. This whole story, I think, could actually be in a microcosm, an illustration of what was going on in the church, because of the fact that the Christians who were Jewish were being kicked out of the synagogue because it no longer fit the theology that, well, the Messiah couldn't have come. But if you say he has, then we got to part ways. And it caused tension a lot of times with families. Yeah, there you go. So, for the second time, they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, give glory to God, only to God. Now, okay, you got to give it up to God here. We know that this man is a sinner, okay? This guy you said, he answered, I do not know whether he's a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. Notice he just sticks with the facts and doesn't get into any kind of like finger pointing or blaming or assertions. He doesn't get into anything theological. He just sticks with what happened. They said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And he answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? So obviously this just represents frustration and the fact that how many times do you have to hear this to really believe? The thing is, when light strikes in the darkness and people don't want to believe what is right there in front of them, they look for ways to say, well, that can't be the truth because I've already got the idea of what the truth is. This story is supposed to be illustrative of how, if we're being honest as human beings, we got to go with what the light reveals. That's all there is to it. Then, verse 28, then they reviled him, saying, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. The man answered, here is an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. Apparently this was not well known, right? If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him. Notice how he goes a little bit beyond and saying, he's like, okay, you guys aren't picking up on the light that I'm shedding here. So let me tell you what I'm seeing now that the darkness has been dispelled. They answered him, you were born entirely in sins, and are you trying to teach us? And they drove him out. Notice how they want to cling to the darkness, okay? They do not want to admit that the light has actually shown their presumptions to be false. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Notice Jesus had been absent from this whole thing ever since the healing happened, right? Do you believe in the Son of Man? The Son of Man is a very interesting phrase. It is something that Jesus used to describe himself, but in the Gospel of John, it means more than just me. It's referring to that, it's a messianic kind of a thing, and it does refer to the whole scope of Jesus' work, his life, death, burial, resurrection, ascension, and such, all of that. That's wrapped up in this Son of Man terminology. Verse 36, he answered, and who is he, sir, The word sir, the word Lord are the same word in Greek. It's kurios. So the fact that he calls him Lord doesn't necessarily is recognizing him as God, because when we hear L-O-R-D with a capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, typically that's what's going on. But that's not this is more of a term of respect, okay? Sir, tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. Ooh, bam, bam, bam. What a dramatic way of saying it, right? The man, he wasn't really looking for a spiritual experience, but through the process of the grilling and such, it's like he became more and more he illustrates what happens when the light shines in the darkness and shows something to be obvious. It's like he says, well, that's it. I've got to go with that. I've got to go with that. He said, Lord, I believe. It's the same word as he said that got translated as sir, kurios. I believe. By the way, when you say I believe, pistuo, in the Gospel of John, this is consonant with the intention of the book. If you look at the very end, it says these things were written in order that you may believe. Yeah, and the fact that the man does believe, this is why this whole story is a microcosm of the entire gospel. He said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. Jesus said, I came into this world for judgment. Judgment is to decide. A decision is to like open the door, close the door, open the door. Is the door open or is the door closed? Judgment, krites, is that thing that determines that. Okay, we've got to put a dividing line here. Okay, I came into this world for judgment, so that people would have to decide. Okay. So that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. Jesus is basically saying that if you presume that you have the light and you have the truth, you don't really need what he's about to do, but you really do. You really do need what he's doing. But you might perceive yourselves as seeing, but in reality, you are not. Let's finish this. Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, surely we are not blind, are we? Is this an introspective moment, or is this an assertion? And I think it's more of an assertion. It's like, how dare you call us blind? We're the keepers of the law, and we're the ones that are blind? Really? I think it's more of an assertion than it is a doubt. Surely we are not blind, Surely we're not blind, are we? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say, we see, your sin remains. The reason why he's saying this is because they have refused to go with what the light has exposed, okay? Light in the darkness means there's no darkness. And if you latch on to and keep those old ways of thinking, then you are not going to benefit from the impact of the light. This is what Jesus is saying.